Hey everybody, welcome to the show. Around the nation right here, TYT Nation. Jeff Waldorf here with you on this Monday afternoon. Welcome. Got a great show for you guys today, including Baltimore versus Donald Trump. That's an interesting story. We also have Meghan McCain doing what Meghan McCain does best, and that is talk about herself. Kamala Harris's student loan forgiveness plan was recently unveiled. And we're going to look at it, and we're going to look at some of the reaction to it and what I think about the plan. So I don't want to give too much away, but we're going to talk about that. And then, of course, also over the weekend, Kathy Griffin goes after the Bernie bros. So that went about as well as you would think. So we're going to talk about that. Lots of stuff, lots of fun stuff. Before we get into it, I want to thank some patrons, patreon.com/TYTNation. First off, I want to find, the newest patrons here. I want to thank Len Norris, Jeffrey Edmonds, Sherry Haruchi, Russell Dixon, and Alicia Greer. So thank you to those patrons. And then, hey, we have a new member, new channel member, Jeanette Villalona. So thank you, Jeanette. Definitely appreciate that. That goes to, of course, helping the show. All right. So you guys know today's Monday. Tomorrow is the Revolution Rally in Detroit. And it's actually Tuesday and Wednesday. So I'll be there both those days. I'll do some live tweeting of the debates, of course, happening both days. You can see me there at the rally. I will be there. Come up, say hi. We'll talk politics, whatever you want. So that should be pretty fun. I'm not sure about shows for the rest of the week though. Might be back on Friday. I'm not entirely sure what's going on this week. But so I will keep you guys in the know. So I'll let you guys know. All right. So that said, let's see. We've got, well, you know what? Let's go to the first story. Let's kind of dive right in because there's a lot of stuff to get to. Actually, you know what? No. I know I'm kind of like flip-flopping back and forth here. But I do want to share a poll, right, with you guys. So lately I've been conducting polls for subscribers, for you guys, right, basically. If you haven't subscribed already, please do so. Just some fun polls. Today was who has a better plan for student loan debt? And unsurprisingly, Bernie Sanders leads at a commanding 84%. Was Elizabeth Warren, I cannot say words today. This is a continuation from Friday. Elizabeth Warren, her plan comes in at 14%, Kamala Harris at 1%, and Joe Biden also at 1%. We don't even know Joe Biden's plan. I don't even think he has a plan to address student loan debt. Specifically, though he did come out in favor of, debt-free four-year college. So, I mean, that's at least something, right? So there's that. And I just wanted to share that because I really enjoy doing these polls. And hopefully you guys enjoy it as well and participate and, answer the questions. And some of them are just, like fairly straightforward polls. But it's just fun to be able to get the audience, you guys to interact and have a little fun, with the comments and voice your opinion. So, yeah, that's fun. Okay, now let's move on. Let's go to Donald Trump versus Elijah Cummings and the city of Baltimore. Okay. So over the weekend, President Trump lobbed an incredibly racist attack against Representative Elijah Cummings. Now, following his criticism of the state of the border, Trump lashed out at Cummings, calling his district a rodent-infested mess. Jeez. Now, his district encompasses much of Baltimore, right? And his district is 53% African American. So remember that context. It's kind of important here. So now let me give you the tweets first. He says, Representative Elijah Cummings has been a brutal bully. Already we're starting out great. Shouting and screaming at the great men and women of Border Patrol about conditions at the southern border, when actually his Baltimore district is far worse and more dangerous. His district is considered the worst in the USA. That's not actually true. As proven last week during a congressional tour, the border is clean, efficient, and well-run, just very crowded. Cummings district is a disgusting rat and rodent-infested mess. Also not true. If you spent more time in Baltimore, maybe he could help clean up this very dangerous and filthy place. Then, further on, he goes on to ask, why is so much money sent to the Elijah Cummings district? Which, that's not okay. Anyway, when it's considered the worst run and most dangerous anywhere in the United States, again, not true. No human being would want to live there. Why don't you ask the people of Baltimore before you make that statement? Where is all this money going? How much is stolen? Investigate this corrupt mess immediately. And I love how he goes for, oh my God, it's corrupt and dirty and rat infested. And then we're sending them so much money, but they must be stealing it. Wow, as if the dog whistle is not loud enough. It is a human whistle. You ever notice how, by the way, he only calls African American majority areas infested? I wonder why that is. Now, here's the reality, right? So the United States actually does have one of the worst areas for human beings, right? And some of the worst poverty in the world, not the world, but the developed world, right? So that includes, of course, the United States, Canada, European Union, etc. Again, the developed world, right? So it doesn't really count developing countries where there's even more massive, horrific poverty. This is just for countries that, are at a certain level, right? So what state has the worst poverty in the developed world? One of the worst places for you to live is in America. That would be Alabama. Alabama. In fact, the UN came in and they're like, I cannot believe people live like this in a country, that is so incredibly wealthy. There were people suffering from, what was it, hookworm or ringworm? Those are illnesses basically thought to have been eradicated in the United States and are really only present in third world countries. We have conditions in Alabama that people live in that are akin to third world nations without proper sanitation. And he's talking about Baltimore. But again, this is the problem, right? We have a super wealthy country where the gains are not being shared amongst the people. Most of the minorities who in the history of America, by the way, got held back from achieving generational wealth. I mean, you had slavery, Jim Crow, segregation. Now you have redlining and other practices, right, that discriminate against African Americans. And, of course, you even had violent actions against African American-owned businesses. I mean, you ever heard of Black Wall Street? A lot of people haven't, because it was literally burnt down by a group of angry white supremacists. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about some of those issues facing the African American community. I mean, slavery, not that long ago. There are people, I'm sorry, did I say slavery? No, I actually meant segregation. I meant segregation and civil rights. Remember the civil rights fight? There are still people alive that were, that were in that fight, that were literally fighting for the same rights for human beings of a different color. They're still alive. So this is not something that is ancient history that's old. It's recently happened, and so we still have a lot of issues, right? So why don't we talk about that? Oh, right, because a lot of Trump's base are people who chased out those black-owned businesses and black-owned business owners. So now I want to go to the response here from Representative Cummings. So he hit back on Twitter with this. Mr. President, I go home to my district daily. Each morning I wake up and I go and fight for my neighbors. It is my constitutional duty to conduct oversight of the executive branch. So, of course, a lot of this, these attacks against Elijah Cummings comes from him trying to do his oversight authority. And Donald Trump, no like that. But he also added, it is my moral duty to fight for my constituents. Just yesterday, I held a hearing on the skyrocketing prices of prescription drugs and the financial hardships that families across the nation and in Baltimore are facing. So that's something, by the way, that's important because President Trump had promised to do something about the soaring prices of prescription drugs. And yet, what has he done? Absolutely nothing. He basically said, you pharmaceutical companies, you should cut that out. I solved the problem. No, he didn't. I've done previous reporting where you had drug companies that continue to raise the prices of their drugs even more dramatically as they did before. Why is that? Because they know that Donald Trump is a paper tiger. He will do absolutely nothing to address this. Meanwhile, you had Senator Bernie Sanders just over the weekend taking a bunch of people over to Canada in order to get cheaper insulin. Yeah, so that happened, right? So now I'm going to get more tweets here from Elijah Cummings responding to this. He says, Mr. President, we can address this together. 2 years ago, I went to the White House to ask you to endorse my bill to let the government negotiate directly for lower drug prices. That's, of course, allowing Medicare to do that, which would, of course, help. And he said, you told me then that you supported the legislation, that you would work with me to make it happen. I took you at your word. I took you at your word. Well, man, that's the first mistake. Never take Donald Trump at his word. Look, here's the thing. I'm tired of representatives treating Donald Trump as if he is some sort of rational actor, like he is a fellow politician like themselves that is actually interested in governing this country. He's not. He's not. Look, Donald Trump is the proverbial tiki torch being wielded by white supremacists. That's who he is. Sooner or later, he's going to catch something on fire, right? It's going to burn down. And look, he may not be the disease, but he is the most visible symptom. So please, let's stop legitimizing this guy. Again, over and over and over. The last, few years, since Donald Trump became president, and even beforehand, I kept saying, stop legitimizing the guy. He is not a rational person. He was not going to work with you. He's just not. But look, the Democrats, and this is what frustrates me about Democrats, by the way. They can't help but be conciliatory to a guy who is figuratively sitting on top of you, telling you to stop hitting yourself while he uses your own hands to punch yourself in the face. That's what he's doing. You want to talk about brutal bullying? That guy's the bully. This is total projection. And look, he is not interested in solutions. He is not the adult in the room. He is nothing more than a self-important man-child who has been entrusted with way too much power. White poverty, black poverty, he doesn't care. He doesn't care about poverty. And that's the thing. That's why Alabama, full of his voters, he doesn't care about them either. And look, you know why? It's because he doesn't actually like poor people. He hates poor people. But he does love the poorly educated because they end up voting for him while he sits there and laughs about how much of a sucker you are. Because Donald Trump loves taking advantage of suckers. And they are born literally every minute when it comes to him. He's never met a sucker he did not love. Because he's a con artist. And so, look, not only do the people that support him, are they suckers, right? Because we know they are. But they also love the racist dog whistles. They love to blame black people for poverty because they desperately want to feel superior to someone else. So the sooner we stop legitimizing this guy and thinking that we can work with him and take his lies at face value, the sooner you can actually be the resistance. Okay. Moving on. Let's go to Baltimore's response. All right.
What would you like to tell the President of the United States as he continues to go after your city?
I would like to tell him stop tweeting. No president in the modern history of the office of the president have done any childish behavior like this president has exhibited. And if he really wants to, he needs to send us the federal assistance, not only to Baltimore, to cities around this country that are in the same situation that Baltimore is in, but he's so interested in childish tweets. I mean, you know, he's the most powerful man on the face of the earth as president of the United States of America. And this is below a president to do these kind of things. He should be uniting this country instead of racially dividing us. I mean, a president have never, in my lifetime, exhibit this type of behavior. He has alienated our allies around the country. I mean, what else is he going to do?
So that was Baltimore Mayor Bernard Young talking about Donald Trump's recent attacks on Twitter against Representative Elijah Cummings, as well as the city of Baltimore. Now here's the thing, right? So now you heard what he said. President should just stop tweeting. Oh, look, I understand the sentiment, right? But the tweets are only a part of the problem. The other big problem is Donald Trump being in office. Again, he is a man-child. He doesn't care about the plight of cities across the country. In fact, I think he would pull funding from these cities in order to punish them if he could. As he certainly has threatened to do so plenty of times before. But this is who we're dealing with, right? And you want to talk about divisiveness, right? No, they're right when they point out that President Trump is divisive, and yet Republicans say, oh, no, it wasn't, it's not Trump that's being divisive, not at all. No, it was Obama. Now, what's one thing that President Obama had done to be divisive? Oh, right, get elected while black. That was enough to, of course, turn, a lot of these now Trump supporters into just frothing, raving lunatics. I mean, they came up with every conceivable insane conspiracy theory, including the fact the idea that that President Obama was not born in America, and it was Donald Trump who would go on television and talk about it all the time. Oh, don't worry, I've got people in Hawaii investigating. I get the best investigative team looking for the birth certificate. So you want to talk about divisive, but look again. This is who we're dealing with, right? Now, I want to get to another piece of that interview where it was asked if Trump had even offered to help with some of the issues in Baltimore. Because again, he says, why doesn't a Representative Elijah Cummings go back to Baltimore? That sounds eerily close to what he was saying for the squad, right? Except instead of go back to Baltimore, which is crime-ridden and rat-infested, whatever, he just told these women of color, one was a Latina, one was from Somalia, to go back to their own countries, when in reality, of course, America is their country. 3 of them were born here. 1 was a naturalized citizen. Boy, that is the same attack, except instead of go back to your country, it's go back to your city. But anyway, I want to go to the part of the interview where, and this is CNN's John Berman, asked if Trump even offered help with some of those conditions, considering how he is, of course, the President of the United States. Let's take a look at his response.
No, he has never reached out. And he had a pledge that he was going to do infrastructure. We're still waiting on that. We have an aging infrastructure in the city of Baltimore with an unfunded mandate by the EPA for us to correct it and we have to constantly raise water rates on the poor people of the city of Baltimore. We're a poor city. Do we have, problems? Yeah, we have problems with crime and everything else, just like any other major city. Just like the city that his person, Mitch McConnell, represent, have these problems.
Do you think that these attacks are even really about your city or about something else?
I think it's about dividing this country. If you look, he attacked 4 minority women and didn't even do the research to find out that 3 of them were born here, and 1 is a naturalized citizen now. And then he attacked one of the most powerful congressmen in the country, in Elijah Cummings, who have represented Baltimore well. I mean, there's a pattern now of attacking people of color. I mean, if you want to help us, help us. Don't talk about us. Send the resources that we need to rebuild America. He's talking about he want to make America great again. Then put the money in the cities that need it the most. And that way you can make America great again. But what he's doing is he's making America the laughingstock of the world. Our allies, he have alienated our allies. I mean, come on, no president have ever done anything like that. Our country's in turmoil under his leadership.
Again, there's not a lot there that isn't true. So let me add onto it and just say that it's not about making America great again. No, it's about making America great for white, wealthy conservatives. That's what his whole administration is about. I mean, whatever helps Donald Trump specifically, right? That is what the focus of this administration has been on. Lowering taxes, reducing regulation, attacking his political enemies. The whole idea of getting rid of the ACA, right, or otherwise known as Obamacare, is because when the ACA was put into place, and not a lot of people know this, but in order to fund it, there was a very progressive taxation system put into place. So I don't remember the figures. I think it was somewhere around $7 million over 10 years is how much it cost people who are on the top end of the economic spectrum. So you repeal the ACA, and these wealthy people save a lot of money. And so that was the main impetus behind getting rid of the ACA. Plus, it just worked well politically with the Republican base who hates healthcare. And speaking of Kentucky, by the way, so it's kind of an ironic thing is that, and I'll keep going back to this because it's both sad and hilarious at the same time. You have people there who benefited from the ACA, the state-run exchange called Connect. Now, when you ask people, because reporters have, they went down there and they asked, okay, how do you like Connect? Oh, I love it. Oh, it's great. I actually can get more affordable health insurance than I could before. Now, that doesn't mean insurance is affordable. Of course, we still have that problem. Millions of Americans cannot afford good insurance. Many of them are underinsured, et cetera. But that's the problems with the ACA, and we've talked about that plenty of times. But again, they ask about Connect, right? They love Connect, but when they say, well, what do you think about Obamacare? Hate it. Socialism. I despise it. Well, that kind of tells you everything you need to know about the Republican base, right? But look, as I said, the things that the administration was really focused on doing is things that help Donald Trump and his class. Lowering taxes, reducing regulation, etc. And of course, again, defending himself against political enemies, right? Now, a couple of things. There was criminal justice reform that was mainly spearheaded by Jared Kushner. That was actually not a bad thing. And he gets credit for that. Kushner does. But you also can't help but wonder if everything they do basically has one motive and one motive only, to benefit Donald Trump and his family. Whether politically, legally, or financially, if there's no benefit to himself or his buddies, well, then the administration basically ignores it. And so I love how these officials, by the way, come back and say, but wait a minute, Donald Trump, you promised to come and help our community. Yeah, but Donald Trump's promises aren't worth anything. They're about as, I guess, fully fleshed out. Actually, no, you know what? I was going to make a terrible comparison. Let's just say that they're not worth anything, right? If they were written down, they're not worth the paper that it's written on. So And as far as Donald Trump promising something, again, this is somebody who lies constantly to your face every single day. This is who Donald Trump really is. These attacks, they're not outliers, right? These attacks are exactly who Donald Trump and unfortunately, most of his ardent followers who voted for him, they love these attacks, and that's kind of who they are, right? That's why they voted for Donald Trump, because they saw this guy and they said, finally, there's a man who hates who I hate, and he's not afraid to say it. Okay. Let's move on to Meghan McCain.
The thing that I said is that as someone who is, I think, one of only like 3 Republicans or conservatives on this entire network, I always am concerned about the next generation coming up. Mm-hmm. And young people that are interested in conservative ideals only see this. They only see race baiting. They only see the Trump administration. And what Republicans should be most concerned about right now, well, from my perspective, is what comes next, because we will be out of power. All politics is cyclical. And at a certain point, you're going to have a bunch of millennials who think their entire Republican Party is someone who is, you know, the person in charge thinks that all communities of color are infested. And the CNN anchor who got emotional talking about his hometown, I think...
Victor Blackwell.
Yes, I think when you see people like that showing outward emotion anchors on air, I think you know that it's...
Well, what's real...
So that was The View co-host Meghan McCain talking about how Trump's racism is hurting Republicans. Okay, so now she's a Republican. She points that out. She's a conservative. And so from her context, and she says, well, from my point of view, this is really hurting us with the young people. Is there anything that she talks about or anything from her perspective that doesn't actually involve something impacting her personally? Again, the perspective is, I'm a Republican, I like tax cuts, I hate regulation, I hate the estate tax. How am I going to save my vast fortune if the next generation hates Republicans for being totally racist? How dare you, Donald Trump, give up the ghost? I mean, seriously. That ghost, of course, being Republican racism, which actually isn't a ghost at all. It is very much alive and well. The difference between then and now is that the racist rhetoric was hidden by code words. For example, urban, welfare queen, and thug. That's just 3 examples, right? Then, of course, we can talk about fraud, right? So Republicans talk about voter fraud all the time, right? Or they even talk about fraud in our welfare system. Now, when Republicans talk about fraud, they're not talking about the white couple in Alabama cashing their dead mom's Social Security checks. That is considered fraud. No, what they talk about is just black people being on welfare. Well, they're on welfare. There must be some fraud involved. Or when they talk about voter fraud, right? Now, their solution to the basically non-existent problem of voter fraud is to do things that would negatively impact black and brown communities, and to keep these people, including students as well, from voting. Why? Because they vote for most part for the Democrats. Again, modern Republicanism is rooted in racism, unfortunately. And why? They took over the racist mantle from the Dixiecrats. Those were the Southern Democrats who, when the Democrats decided to embrace, civil rights, they said, no, we're not in favor of civil rights at all. No, what we're going to do, we're going to switch over to the Republican Party. We're going to take it over. Now, if you didn't know that, it's because Republicans love to rewrite history. And there's no wonder why, because that same history saw Republicans successfully utilizing the Southern strategy. Fear and resentment of black people in order to win elections at the South and at the national level. That is a problem that is far beyond Donald Trump. And that has existed long before Donald Trump, and unfortunately will exist long after Donald Trump. It actually created Trumpism. And so I love how Meghan McCain And a lot of these anti-Trump Republicans want to ignore that entire history because it's super inconvenient and lay the blame squarely at the feet of Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump, you know, is an old school racist, right? But he's not the source of the problem. He's a symptom of the disease. And the problem with the Republican Party is that for so long, it relied on racism that to deliver votes to politicians that then overwhelmingly help extremely wealthy people and corporations. I mean, it's sort of the perfect racket. You pit everybody else against each other, poor whites, poor blacks, and you laugh all the way to the bank. It's profit. And so that's why the next generation, we've seen this already. We know what's going on. That's why younger people are refusing the Republican Party. They're like, no, we're not in favor of this. Because the Republican Party, at the end of the day, really only represents the interests of the very wealthy. And they use racism, the worst kind of stuff, racism, xenophobia, etc., in order to do it, in order to funnel those votes. That's who the Republican Party is. And so Meghan McCain is right to fear for the future of her party, because a future that is built on hate, racism, and xenophobia, and giving the wealthy basically everything, is doomed to failure at some point. Okay. So, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to take a break. We'll come back with Kamala Harris's loan forgiveness program. So that's a lot of different components to that story. And if I actually press the right button, we also have Kathy Griffin attacking so-called Bernie bros. So stay right here. Some of the fun stories are coming up next. So please like and share the stream if you haven't already. And we'll be back in a couple of minutes to read comments. All right. Be back around the nation. Welcome back to the show. Around the Nation right here, TWT Nation. Jeff Waldorf here with you. Okay, so I've got some comments here, but I need to set something up real quick. Here we go. Yeah, that should, no, that's not the same. Okay, hold on a second. All right. So let's get to a couple comments here. Jeanette Villalona says Congress passed a bill to protect voters, but once it hits the Senate, it dies. That's not a shock, unfortunately. Mitch McConnell calls himself the Grim Reaper for reasons that are fairly obvious. Detective Foz says, I think Puerto Rico has the right idea. Clean house. Absolutely. And Sarge Tech, my absolute favorite choice is Bernie Sanders. Indeed. Then a couple other non-member comments here. And again, thank you to the members who support the show. Veritas, a.k.a. Koru, says that the Democrats could just get the impeachment process started. Donnie will go hide out at his golf courses, and that will hopefully keep him from dragging the country even further into darkness. Thing is, and I've talked about this before, Nancy Pelosi refuses to do impeachment. Now there are about 100 Congress, I think 100 members of the House that are now in favor of impeachment proceedings. Nancy Pelosi will not be swayed, at least not until there are a massive majority of members of the House that favor impeachment. And of course, there's a lot of different reasons. For one, she thinks it's 1998 still, and that an impeachment will only help Donald Trump. That's not necessarily true. The only people that it would help is people who are already, convinced of Donald Trump's innocence. So it's, I think, a grave political miscalculation to think that, oh, no, this is only going to help Donald Trump. Look, even if, obviously, he's not going to get removed by the Republicans, because that's the Senate Republicans are, where they actually vote to remove a president. I don't think they're going to do it, right? Obviously. But it will put all those Republicans on the record. And whatever comes out through this investigation, basically they're saying that, no, all this stuff, this criminality, meets with Senate Republican approval. And so at least they're on the record of being absolutely terrible human beings, as well as legislators. And so the other part, of course, is that Nancy Pelosi makes a lot of money from Donald Trump, off Donald Trump, I should say, saying Trump is bad, Trump is red. If you actually were successful in eliminating him, then what would she run on? And then finally, Cynical Progressive says, does anyone else really believe that these candidates grabbing their little piece of Bernie's platform will actually fight for us? Bernie's the original champion of the people. Who needs a weak poser? Look, I agree with you 100%. Bernie Sanders is somebody who's been standing for these policies for a very, very long time. He's been consistent. And so, yeah, he's right to say that, hey, do you believe these people are going to fight for you? And I don't. The sad way that Elizabeth Warren, I like Elizabeth Warren, but the sad way that she has waffled on Medicare for all and her student loan plan, not as robust as Bernie Sanders, I just, I'm worried. I don't like it at all. I don't like that she seems to be flip-flopping all over the place, or not seems to be, but she is flip-flopping all over the place. And that's not a good thing. And again, this goes to consistency. Bernie Sanders is consistent, and that's why I am in favor of him. And so I agree with that comment. Okay, so thank you for your comments. I appreciate it. So now let's move on, and we'll talk about Kamala Harris's plan to address the student loan crisis. Let's take a look. Senator Kamala Harris has recently revealed her plan to deal with student loan debt. So now student loan debt It's approximately $1.6 trillion now, affects over 40 million Americans. And so now she joins Senator Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, who have also revealed their detailed student loan cancellation plans. So now let's get to the details on what her plan would actually do and who it would affect. Now, grads under Harris's plan would have $20,000 of their student loans erased if they established and operate a business in a disadvantaged community for at least 3 years. And this only affects people who have taken out Pell Grants. During that business development period, they would also be able to defer their debt interest-free. Now, Harris's plan specifically aims at historically black colleges and universities and wants to try to increase black entrepreneurship. So now this is very much aimed and detailed towards the African American community. Okay, well, I understand that as a campaign strategy, right? But there are lots of other people who have crippling student loan debt, and not just people who take out Pell Grants. There are, again, millions of Americans who are defaulting right now on their student loan bills because they just can't afford the payments. And besides, it doesn't really help the black community all that much anyway. For one, $20,000 of debt erasure, kind of a drop in the bucket, even when you're dealing with historically black colleges and universities. In fact, $20,000 would barely cover 1 year of tuition at one of these colleges or many of these HBCUs. Even taking into consideration that $5,000 to $6,000 Pell Grant, add books, rent, and other living expenses, $20,000 is not very much. You are still left with a lot of debt afterwards. So, and of course, you have to qualify for a Pell Grant, which means you would have to be low income in the first place. Pell Grants are reserved for students from low-income households and can provide up to $6,195 for one school year. In the 2017-2018 school year, about 7 million people received Pell Grants. So of those 7 million people, if you create a business and it operates for 3 years in a disadvantaged area, then you can have up to $20,000 of your debt erased. That seems incredibly narrow. Look, the problem here is, again, if you can't afford a school or to go to school and you need a Pell Grant, then how are you going to graduate and create a business in a disadvantaged area in the first place? Look, some people have done it, and that's great, and that's amazing. Way to go, right? You're obviously very extremely talented at business or had some sort of backing, whatever. That's great. Now, that's a feat that not majority of Americans can actually do. I mean, and we still have, again, around 40 million people who owe student loans that are crushing them at this very moment. Not only that, but again, you have to have the business running for about 3 years. You know how many small businesses fail within the first year? Roughly, well, not the first year. The first year is actually not too bad, but when it comes to the first 3 years, about 30% of all small businesses fail. Now, actually, that's a lot better than I thought it would be, but these are 2014 numbers too. And so, but of course, the other question is how many of those small businesses are created by low-income people who had to get Pell Grants in order to go to school? I would argue not very many. Again, it depending on what you do, of course, it might take a decent amount of money or backing to create a business. Sometimes it doesn't, and you know that happens as well. And this policy might actually help them out quite a bit. But again, this is way, way, way too narrow and won't help the majority of people. And look, here's the other thing, right? So say you do take up a Pell Grant and you are able to get enough money to go and start a small business, maybe incur some debt, to get equipment, etc., or employees, whatever, right? Say your business fails. Well, then that debt's on you. right? If you did manage to take out some debt to start a small business. Not only that, but your student loans, you would also owe on that debt still because it wouldn't be forgiven because your business failed within the first 3 years. So this plan essentially punishes failure. So if you do fail, you are worse off than you were before. That's this plan. So, of course, it's going to get a lot of pushback. And it did online. In fact, here you had some tweets here. One of them was from Camilla Londono, right? So she said, I work at an incubator in a university that is deeply committed to innovation in a city that has what feels like an incubator in every corner. And this is so absurd. A lot of new businesses fail, and they take a lot of money and effort regardless of success. Who does this help? Well, it helps a very small minority of people. Adriana Lacey says, just trying to understand who these people are who were granted Pell Grants but also have the capital to start a business in a disadvantaged area and can ensure it's successful for at least 3 years. Again, that is a super small pool of people. As Zitran says, and this is fun, what do we want? Student loan forgiveness for Pell Grant recipients. When do we want it? After operating a business for 3 years in disadvantaged communities. Not exactly the most catchy chant. Rob Delaney said, yesterday I announced that as president, I'll establish student loan debt forgiveness for a program for men named Kevin who can bench their wives 10 times on top of a Winnebago, traveling at 15 miles an hour. I love these tweets. Brandon Jensen says, yesterday I announced that as president, I'll establish a student loan debt forgiveness program for Pell Grant recipients who start a hair salon that has pun names. Sheer Madness, Jack the Clipper, Do or Die. Those are just some examples. I love puns. That's why I had to mention that. Rob Westman says, this is like one of those things where if you eat a 72-ounce steak, you don't have to pay for it. Finally, Johnny Firecloud with my favorite. The 22 people that will benefit are going to be so excited. Look, aside from these tweets, the plan is just terrible. Again, Pell Grant recipients face more challenges in obtaining their degree than other students. Federal data released last year showed that only half of all students at four-year colleges and universities who got Pell Grants back in 2011 graduated within 6 years, in comparison to nearly 60% of all other students. So already they are hugely disadvantaged. I would think that some of them are unable to finish their schooling because they have other pressing matters, like keeping the lights on, paying the bills, etc., and having to work while they go to school. I mean, again, there's a reason that they take out Pell Grants because they're already low income. In fact, Jessica Thompson, Policy and Research Director at the advocacy group, the Institute for College Access and Success, talked to PBS, told them last year, there is some threshold at which there are things that colleges don't have control over and can't be accountable for. But if you are consistently leaving more students worse off than when they came to you through these loans, that doesn't seem like a worthwhile investment. Stuff like this is hard, but there's no question colleges and universities could be doing better for these students. Not only that, but the federal government could be doing better for these students. Right now, the federal government is basically the lender. That's one of the big problems with the student loans. The government has turned into a lender. So they are lending out private student loans to people. And then basically when the bill is due, they contract these third parties out to collect student loan debt. And so these are your servicing companies like Sallie Mae, Nelnet, etc. Why are these private corporations trying to recoup this debt? And more importantly, why do you have to go into debt to get an education anyway? An education that is required for a lot of high-end jobs that are, that actually pay a decent amount and give decent benefits, as opposed to, of course, jobs that don't offer decent pay and don't offer benefits that are unskilled. Those kinds of jobs, by the way, are going away in this economy. They continue to disappear, whether it be through automation or outsourcing or a combination of both. It basically is required to have an education, a higher education or a trade degree in order to get some of these higher paying, good American jobs. And so when you load people up with all of this debt, it has a vastly negative impact. Now, let me give you more information here. Let's see. This is what Harris's previous proposals were on student loan debt crisis. Basically, she would make 4-year public college debt-free, not free, just debt-free, and expand the income-driven repayment program, which allows borrowers to elect to repay their loans as a percentage of their income. So not only that, but she also would make community college free as well. That's your 2-year community colleges. So here we have a candidate, based on all the information, that is dealing in half measures, or actually more like a quarter measure. Elizabeth Warren's plan is a bit more robust. It does have means testing and will only forgive about $50,000 worth of student loan debt. So I guess that is more your half measure. And you have this thing that's more of like a quarter measure. So you're asking for a quarter of the loaf as opposed to the whole loaf. Whereas, again, that's Bernie Sanders' plan, who has the simplest and most comprehensive plan. Take all student debt and wipe it out of existence. I think you know what one I'm in favor of. Okay. All right. So let's go to the last segment here.
It makes me sad, and I'm just going to say it, that Bernie and Joe are polling so much higher. God bless you. Bernie and Joe are polling so much higher than these women, and I know that dog whistle. I know my little ears prick up. I know what that is. It's even women who are afraid to vote for a woman. And you know, Bernie, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe Bernie's ever passed a bill. And I don't like the Bernie bros. I'm sorry. They're like Trumpers. They come at me and they threaten me in the same way. And I don't like that base. I don't like, and I don't trust.
All right. So that was Kathy Griffin, once again, going after Senator Bernie Sanders as well as supporters of Senator Bernie Sanders and saying that they are just like Trump supporters. I mean, of course, because, you know, people who believe in health care without co-pays or deductibles for every single man, woman, and child in America are the same as the people who marched in Charlottesville with tiki torches saying the Jews will not replace us. Bernie Sanders, by the way, is Jew. So I don't know, man. If you're Kathy Griffin, I can't tell the difference. I mean, this is somebody who's obviously an overpaid, out-of-touch celebrity who got herself in quite a bit of trouble, by the way, for what she did with a so-called decapitated Trump head. But is it any wonder why this erupted into a firestorm on social media? I want to read you a couple of fun tweets from this. For one, Kamala Harris is a cop tweeted, and this is like a fake quote of Kathy Griffin. I hate Bernie Sanders because poor people who need health care were mean to me online. Well, that is kind of the crux of what she's saying. And so she continued to double down on Twitter in a thread about the recent Bob Mueller hearing. She had said in response to this, and this is from Terry Gidwitz with The Squad, I am more concerned that you're likening Bernie supporters to Trump supporters. It's a gross generalization and dismissive and an insult. All right. Griffin responded, OMG, can you Bernie bros just take a seat this year and sit the F down in a stadium full of seats? How did this plan of attack work out for you last time? I thought so. Just stay home. If that's what you're so proud of, Bernie or bust, right? Well, now wait a minute here. What attack? This person saying, hey, look, maybe you shouldn't say that we're just like Trump supporters. That's kind of inaccurate, and actually super inaccurate, to which, of course, she went off the rails and decides to attack. Instead of saying, hey, you know what? I understand where you're coming from. I have been attacked by the more militant members of Sanders supporters, and trust me, they're out there, just like they're out there for every single campaign. I don't think you're all like Trump supporters. I'm sorry. Every campaign has terrible supporters, but that's a bigger issue and more relatable to internet culture. That would make more sense. Instead, she says, shut up, Bernie, bro. A couple more fun tweets here. Humanist Report said, nice ratio. I'm wondering if you and Trump still keep in touch. I know you two used to be close. And there's, of course, a picture of Kathy Griffin next to Donald Trump. Disastrous. Winko the Bernie bro. Oh, this is going to be good, right? Said, Kathy Griffin, you literally just called a woman a Bernie bro because she has a problem with you using a generalized negative false stereotype. You really don't see anything wrong with what you said at all, do you? No. And this is a problem. They don't see anything wrong at all. They think, no. I'm 100% right because, for one, cable media tells me that there are Bernie bros. And yes, I say things that get a negative response on Twitter from certain people pointing out maybe some hypocrisy here. And then I come to the conclusion, because I'm an absolute genius, that every single person who supports a specific candidate must be the same. Because I got attacked a couple of times. No rational person thinks, oh no, that person, completely the same as everybody else. They're all the same. I don't trust them. I don't like them. I don't trust them because they're just like Trump people. No, they're not. It's ridiculous, right? It's about as ridiculous as saying that every Clinton supporter on Twitter is a terrible person and attacks me constantly because they're so mean. No, I've had interactions with people that I disagree with, Clinton supporters, that were perfectly fine. Disagreement, but absolutely respectful. And so it's both ways, right? There are nasty, terrible Clinton people on Twitter that attack constantly and put out some of the most horrific lies. She's one of them. But there's also terrible Bernie Sanders people as well that attack others. And so here's the thing. It's for one, it doesn't seem to be very equal. It seems to be a lot more from the Hillary Clinton side or the establishment side that does these horrible attacks. But whatever. Okay, bad on both sides, right? Least we can come to is sort of that agreement, right? But now here's the thing. There's some cognitive dissonance going on here in the minds of people like Kathy Griffin. And so I want to get to that, right? Because she talked about the squad, right? So the squad is freshman congresswomen, super progressive. They were recently attacked by Donald Trump. Now, this is Representative Ilhan Omar, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Representative Rashida Tlaib, and Ayanna Pressley. Those four are deeply progressive. Deeply progressive. They believe in things like Medicare for all, free college, living wage, etc. In fact, I believe it was Tlaib who said, you know what, $15 an hour, that's not enough. In fact, the minimum wage should be at least $20 an hour. These are deeply progressive women, right? So now, what's funny is that, we have these women, deeply progressive. She says, oh no, I like those women. Oh, really? You like those women? But you failed to understand that these women were, I guess, in a way, inspired by Bernie Sanders. In fact, they agree with his platform. So you have this huge disconnect. And it kind of shows you that for people like Kathy Griffin, they're not at all interested in policy. It's not about policy. It's just about personality and what the media says about Bernie Sanders. because they haven't exactly been incredibly fair, right? Not at all, in fact. And so, I mean, you got people like Mimi Roca out there saying that, he makes my skin crawl for some reason. I can't put my finger on it. Maybe that says more about you than it does about Senator Bernie Sanders. Because if you, for some reason, agree with him on policy, and yet, for some reason, he makes your skin crawl, maybe he's not the problem. Maybe it's you. Okay. All right. So that's it. That's all I got for you guys today. Thank you for going around the nation with me today. Please like and share the stream already. I'm okay. So we're not going to be here tomorrow. We're not going to be here Wednesday. I'm not so sure about the rest of the week. Maybe we can do a Friday show. I'm not entirely sure. But I will be at the Revolution Rally tomorrow. So, look me up there. That's in Detroit. And hopefully we'll see some of you guys there. If not, remember, love you guys. And change begins with you. Good night, nation. We'll see you guys later.